Hey guys, it's MacDivot, and today I want to show you my league starter for Harvest, which is going to be a crit stun Groundslam Berserker. And before we get into the details, I want to show you a quick gameplay video just to make sure, most importantly, that this is the vibe you're looking for in your league start. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this is a character that I threw together with gear from Standard, so what's going to be different? Well, number one, the damage is going to be much better. This is a build that's intended to stun everything in the game, so when you see blue mobs not dying in one hit, that's just not how things are going to play out in Harvest. Number two, the build is going to be a little bit faster just because this is not a Berserker, and when I actually play Berserker, I'm going to get an insane amount of attack speed from the rage nodes. And lastly, there's a Warcry element that's not in the build yet, in the video at least, because in Harvest, I'm going to be using the new Seismic Cry Warcry skill that is going to give me much more damage and way more AoE as well. Okay, so now we're going to take a look under the hood at the passive skill tree, and I'm going to choose these nodes in the order that I'm actually going to be taking them in League, so you can get a sense of what to take when. We're going to start off in the Marauder starting area, come up here and grab Resolute Technique. We're doing that before we fully invest in the crit so that we're not missing anything. Then we're going to grab these mace nodes. We're committing to mace here, but that's fine because we can use the rustic belt recipe to craft maces as we level up. Then we're going to come down and grab some more life here. We're going to swing down this side of the tree because there's going to be a new node here that we're going to take that's going to allow us to Warcry instantly, and that's going to be important because spamming Seismic Cry is an important part of the build. It's going to give us way more damage, it's going to give us way more AoE, and it's going to help with some of the nodes that we take later on as well. So after that, just going to grab a little bit more life, come up here, grab more defenses, come up here, and now we can swing over to the Duelist starting area, get some more movement speed, attack speed, accuracy, grab Destroyer. We're going to come up here and grab a Jewel Socket for rapid expansion. That's going to give us much more angle AoE on our Ground Slam and let us generate endurance charges. Then we're going to grab Scion Life, and right about now is when we can start investing into crits. We're going to take off Resolute Technique. We're going to get all the disemboweling nodes. We're going to come down here and get these good crit nodes. We're going to come up here and get these mace crit nodes. And now we can come down and get our cluster jewel as well. And you may want to do this earlier actually, but the cluster jewels are where a big part of our damage is coming from. And the most important things you want on your cluster jewels are going to be, of course, 2 sockets for the medium jewels. And the most important node in the large jewel is going to be Graceful Execution. And this is fantastic because what this does is it gives us attack speed, and it gives us accuracy, crit chance, and off stats. And what you're going to find is that accuracy is premium in this build. We're going to need extra because we end up getting very little dexterity, and accuracy checks twice when you're rolling for crits. So we need it because ours is bad, and it's super important for crits. So once we have the large jewel, or you have at least one that works, again, this is fine to get a budget version of first before you get a final one with all the great nodes. We're going to come and do our medium sockets. Now, this is also very important, and the medium sockets are where most of our cluster jewel impact is coming from. The biggest node you want to look for in your medium jewel cluster socket is going to be Provocateur. And what this node does is it gives us a huge amount of value for crit stats, 40% crit strike chance and 15% multi. All it requires is that enemies are taunted, and like I said, that's going to be happening all the time because we're going to be spamming Seismic Cry. It also increases the effect of that, so it all synergizes well. We're going to get that in both medium cluster jewel slots, and then afterwards, in the small slots, we're just going to grab extra life. So now that that's all set up, we are just about ready to look at the Ascendancy. So in the Berserker Ascendancy, you're going to start off and first grab the Warcry node here, Warbringer. What this is going to do is synergize well with number 1, the node that we took, the new notable that is going to give us instant Warcries, because when we Warcry instantly and at this reduced duration due to the cooldown recovery speed, we're going to be healing life, healing mana, going to give us a lot of damage too. It's giving us 20% attack speed and 15% chance to deal double damage, which is essentially a 15% more multiplier. Next, we're going to come over here and go all the way to Rite of Ruin with our Merciless Lab. This is very important because this is going to give us all the attack speed we need to not feel bad with Rohi Urki. And that's because Rohi Urki is very slow. All the weapons you use, even the ones before that, should probably be slow because this is a stun build. We want to get as big of a single hit as possible. And this attack speed is going to be essential to make sure that once you have that, you don't feel like a slug as you're going through map. Then, with the endgame lab, you can come down here to Aspect of Carnage to just slap on that last massive chunk of damage. Okay, now let's jump into the gems and items. So obviously we're going to start with Groundslam. This is linked to all the red gems. We're pretty much just getting as much damage as we can with a little bit of utility along the way. We're getting Brutality, Fortify, Multi-Strike, Ruthless, Melee Fizz. And like I said, this gives us a ton of damage, and with Fortify we get a little defense. Multi-Strike gives us a little bit more speed. Ruthless gives us some stun utility. Pretty simple. Next, we've got Ancestral War Chief set up. This is a much less important link, so this does not have to be 6 link. This can be on a 4 link, whatever. You pop this down on a boss or something, gives you more damage. It's great. With these gems, we're going to buff it up a little bit more, but because we're the main damage dealer, this can wait for later until you're rich. So when you do get the money, it's going to be Brutality, Melee Fizz, Ruthless, Conk Effect, Pulverize. All these do is pump up its damage. Okay, next, we're going to start to get into some utility. And we're starting with the typical melee aura gems. We've got Pride, Flesh and Stone linked to Maim, and War Banner. All these do, every single one of them, is make enemies near you take increased fizz damage, which helps us tremendously. That's what we're here to do. Next on the list, we've got our Cast When Damage Taken set up. And here we're getting into some real sweet utility. We're getting Molten Shell, which keeps us safe when we take damage. We're going to get quite a bit of armor here. So using Molten Shell is going to give us a solid amount of defensive utility. Then we're going Blood Rage. This is going to help with clear because we're going to get Frenzy Charges that increase damage, increase attack speed, help us move faster. And we're going to get Summon Ice Golem, which is fantastic because it gives us crit chance and it gives us increased accuracy, which, like I said earlier, we are starved for. Lastly, we're going to get into our miscellaneous 4 link, where we have a slot where I have Enduring Cry now. This is going to switch to Seismic Cry. Like I mentioned, we're spamming that so that we can activate all our War Cry nodes, and we can get more AoE, and we can get more damage. Next, we have Vulnerability Blasphemy. This is just a nice to have. You only have enough mana to run this if you're using In Presence, which makes it free. So don't worry about it if not. Like I said, nice to have. Then we're going to sneak in a cheeky little Precision. This is just level 1, and if you can run it without making the mana feel too bad or too tight, then go for it. It gives us about 3 to 4% more damage, and it opens up the door to get some nice Watcher's Eye jewels later on as well in the late game. Okay, and so those are all our gems. Let's flip over to items. Now, there's really only one core pivotal unique to this, and that's Rohi Urki. The great thing about this is that it gives a huge amount of physical damage for a single hit. And what I mean by that is that this unique is balanced around having low attack speed and compensating that by pumping up the physical damage of the hit. It gives us a massive hit, and we can compensate for that attack speed reduction, movement speed reduction, accuracy reduction. That will all be covered on the back end, but because this is a stun build, we want to get as big of an initial hit as we possibly can. Having that big number for damage is going to be exactly what we want for this build. And also, like I mentioned, Rohi is coming with that intrinsic level 15 Pulverize support. So that's almost like giving us a 7th link as well, which really sets this item over the top. So yeah, everything else pretty much nice to have. The next most important thing I would say that's going to make this build feel just a little bit smoother, you might not be able to get this until late game, but it's going to be a chest that has the +1 to +2% crit chance affix from an Elder not corruption, but an elder influenced item. So you want to get this as soon as you can. It's just going to help. You're going to find that there aren't really any mace options unless you get a nice rare one that have good crit. They pretty much all have 5 base crits, so getting a flat added crit chance really makes it more smooth in terms of how often you're critting. And the other thing I want to point out on this item is that this is where I've allocated Pain Forger. When you anoint that actually on an amulet, what it's going to do is give you this node right here, which is incredible because it gives huge crit chance, a little bit of stun utility, and most importantly, power charges on stun, which is like the theme of this item, going to make getting crits feel much, much smoother. Okay, so like I said, we've gotten those 2 items out of the way. Everything else is just a nice to have, which is why this is great for a league start. So starting off with the helmet, nothing besides life and armor. Then to the gloves, life and armor. What we do have here and what you are going to need a little bit on your rare items are accuracy, and probably on gloves, but maybe on rings, somewhere you need a little bit of mana leech just to make it feel smooth. Like I said, you're going to get a little bit from Warcry, but having it somewhere else is going to make it feel much better. You don't want to get stuck not being able to use any skills. Okay, another nice to have, Red Blade Tramplers. This is just going to give you decent life, decent res, most importantly, some stun utility. And presence, like I said, just a nice to have. This makes vulnerability free, so you can run that on Blasphemy, make enemies take a little bit more fizz damage, get a little bit more damage from bleed. Just a nice to have. Rings, I got no stats on them besides accuracy. Nothing. Next up, belt. Rislatha's coil, just a nice to have. This usually isn't too expensive, and it doesn't even get counted in Path of Building. But what this item is going to do is allow you to increase the maximum range so that you increase your potential to get huge stunning hits on enemies. And if you get a well-rolled one, it's also sort of like a 10% more multiplier because you can get more of the more damage affix and less of the less damage affix. Okay, now to Flask, Diamond. This is going to be essential, obviously easy to get. You want to have this up as much as possible to make your crit smooth. Lion's Roar, just a nice to have. This is going to give you a little bit more damage. And that's it. Those are all the items and skills. If you made it this far, you might still have a couple questions. And the first one might be, this build sucks. The average damage is barely over 400,000. The total DPS is barely over 1 million. And this is with everything up, all your late game items, everything. Well, here's what you're missing. Groundslam actually has a built-in 50% more multiplier the closer you are to enemies. And that more multiplier isn't counted in Path of Building. But an enemy like a boss where you need that damage, you can essentially add 50% onto the damage here. Other thing you're missing is that this is recorded before the Harvest League patch notes, before any of that. So we're missing potential buffs to the Groundslam gem, we're missing two-hander buffs, we're missing mace buffs, and potentially buffs to Marohi. So at the end of the day, when I actually use this in Harvest, that damage is going to look on average a little bit more like 700k, and the total DPS is going to be probably mid 2 million. The next question you might have is, I thought this was a stun build. We haven't invested anything in stun. What the heck? How are we going to stun anything? Well, here's the truth about stun. We're actually getting all the stun duration that we need from Marohi. It has 30% implicit stun duration, and it has an added mod of 45% increased stun duration. That's plenty. The other truth about stun is that the stun nodes on the tree, Stun Mastery, these nodes suck because the most important thing in terms of stuns to help you get them in the first place is reduced enemy stun duration. And this entire wheel only has 15% reduced stun duration. But from the implicit 25% from Groundslam and everything else that we get on the tree, we're going to be approaching 100% reduced stun threshold, which is all you need. And guess what? We're going to get even more from Seismic Cry. Plus, we have a bunch of Warcry buff effect nodes that are going to boost whatever we get from Seismic Cry even further. So we're going to have plenty of stun threshold. It's probably going to be enough to take enemy stun threshold down to a 0.1% multiplier, which is perfect. That's all we need. And if we can get our average damage up enough to around 700,000, this is going to be enough to stun Shaper. Because again, that's just average damage. That's not even counting our huge upper bounds that we're getting with Rislatha's. We're getting with a crit. ruthless, everything like that. So there you have it. That's everything. If you like what you saw or have any questions, feel free to drop me a comment. If you want to see how this build is going when the league starts, feel free to drop by my Twitch. I'll be streaming just about every day, and I hope to see some of you guys there. All right, bye.